2024 has been an excellent year for horror movies, and with it officially being spooky season, I thought it'd be fun to go through and talk about some of these films. Welcome to Bite Size Bunny, my name's Tony, and today we're going to be talking about the best horror films of 2024 so far. First up, we're going to be talking about what is quite possibly my favorite horror movie of 2024, maybe even my favorite film of the year so far, Cuckoo. Cuckoo follows Gretchen, played excellently by Hunter Schafer, and Gretchen is a teenager who has just moved to Germany with her father's family. But she quickly learns that that was a mistake as some truly freaky and bizarre shit starts to unfold, and I'll leave it at that because the less you know about this one, the better. This is one of the most original and creative horror films I've seen in a long time. Personally, I felt like it perfectly captured what I loved about 70s and 80s horror movies growing up. It had me on the edge of my seat from beginning to end, and as it continued to peel back layers of what was truly going on here, I was completely enthralled by this premise. Hunter Schafer is an excellent lead. She is quickly becoming one of my favorite actors working right now, and I can't wait to continue following her career and see how it grows over time. Dan Stevens is really good as well. He plays this character that leaves you feeling constantly on edge while also trying to guess his true motivations. Lisa Frankenstein is an absolute delight and quite possibly the most underrated film of 2024. I went into this one with extremely low expectations and I had a blast with it. I can't imagine watching this and not having a good time with it. For those of you that don't know, Lisa Frankenstein is a horror comedy following an outcast teenager who ends up developing a relationship with the corpse of her crush. As the two get closer, Lisa and her crush come up with a plan to find the right targets to off in hopes of recycling their various body parts to give her crush a new human body to possess instead of the decaying corpse he's stuck in. This is Zelda Williams' directorial debut and she knocks it out of the park. This movie has so much charm and such a fun, distinct vibe and style to it that really helps it stand out. Catherine Newton is an absolute delight in this film. She is so much fun to watch in this role. And Cole Sprouse is pretty great in this as well. He has a very physical performance with no dialogue whatsoever, but you can tell he is in his zone and having fun with it. I loved Longlegs. This movie feels like Alan Wake 2 and Silence of the Lambs had a baby in the best way possible. Longlegs follows FBI agent Lee Harker as she is trying to track down a serial killer known as Longlegs, who's played by Nicolas Cage. This one starts out pretty simple and straightforward, but as the narrative progresses, it continuously gets weirder and weirder, and I absolutely ate up every second of it. This is a slow burn, extremely atmospheric and unnerving horror experience. It's not the most terrifying movie ever made, but it does a really good job at getting under your skin and sticking with you. Nicolas Cage delivers a very memorable performance as Longlegs that feels truly unhinged and creepy, but Micah Monroe was the standout performance for me personally. I feel like there were so many subtleties with her performance that really helped me buy into this world and story. I know Maxine got some pretty mixed reactions from its audience, but personally, I felt like this was a very satisfying conclusion to Ti West X trilogy. Mia Goth chews the scenery once again as Maxine and continues to prove why she is one of the best actors working today. I love the aesthetic and vibe of this film. It perfectly captures that 80s setting and tone, and I really loved the mystery of this movie. I will say the last act did give me a little bit of whiplash just because it went in a direction I wasn't expecting whatsoever, but it still worked really well for me personally, and I have a feeling I'm gonna enjoy this movie more and more upon each rewatch. The Substance is the most recent addition from 2024 to make this list, but it quickly shot towards the top of my best films of 2024, and it is definitely one of the most memorable horror experiences I've had this year as well. I do have a full review for this movie up for those of you that are interested, but The Substance is an excellent sci-fi body horror film that's a pretty scathing commentary on unrealistic beauty standards and the lengths people will go to try and maintain those unrealistic standards. This one is not for the squeamish and definitely has some imagery that will be engraved in my brain for a while, but it's a really brilliant horror satire. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are on their A game, and if it's still playing in a theater near you, I would highly recommend checking it out. Abigail is an absolute blast. It's another horror comedy from the director of the extremely underrated 2019 film Ready or Not. And in Abigail, we follow a group of criminals that are hired to kidnap the 12-year-old daughter of a powerful crime lord and hold her for ransom overnight. The only caveat is this 12-year-old isn't your normal child. Instead, she is a ballerina vampire. So now this group of criminals have to try and survive the night in this mansion they are locked inside of while fighting for their lives and trying to figure out a way to escape. You can tell everyone in this cast is having so much fun, and it really comes through in the final project. There's not a bad performance in the bunch. The last act does go a little over the top and can feel a little messy at times, but overall, this is a really fun time. Ooh. Late Night with the Devil is an incredible found footage horror film starring David Dastmalchian. And this film follows the final unaired episode of a late night talk show where the host brings on a guest who claims they're possessed in hopes of boosting viewership numbers and saving his show from being canceled by the network. As someone that's not a fan of found footage horror films and usually ends up hating them, I was absolutely blown away by Late Night with the Devil. The director does an impeccable job at keeping you constantly wondering what's gonna happen next and if everything that's happening is actually going on or if it's just a bunch of BS. It is surprisingly way more effective than I ever would have imagined. Back that up with David Dastmalchian's legendary and extremely charismatic performance and you've got horror gold. Ooh. Strange Darling is one of those movies you need to go into knowing as little as possible. I can't recommend enough going into this movie blind and just sitting back and enjoying the ride. This is one of the biggest, most pleasant surprises of the year so far. The direction is top tier, the performances are superb, and nothing could have prepped me for where this film was going. I had such a great time with this, and I loved the experience. Seriously, the less you know about this one, the better. It's available now on digital platforms, and I would highly recommend watching it. Ooh. Okay, we've got another one you need to go into knowing absolutely nothing about, but it's important to note that this one is really hard to watch. It is an incredibly dark film. The Coffee Table is a Spanish horror film that quickly reveals its premise within the first 10 to 15 minutes. Then for the rest of the experience, you will be left sitting there with the worst feeling of dread as you are having to watch this haunting experience unfold before your eyes. Ooh. And rounding out the list, we've got Alien Romulus. What Fede Alvarez was able to do with this movie was truly special. I think this is easily the best movie in the Alien franchise since Aliens. You've got really fantastic performances all across the board, with Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson being the standouts for me personally. This is probably the most I've cared about the cast of human characters in this series so far. You really care about these people, you're rooting for them to make it through this situation, which makes it even more messed up when things start to quickly go downhill as they usually do in these movies. But I was thrilled by how much I enjoyed this one. I was hoping that at the very least we'd get something pretty good, and instead what we got was pretty exceptional. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And I gotta ask, what are some of your favorite horror movies from this year so far?